Hey, friend and colleague, it is Nikki from Full Voice Music on our show. Today, I'm talking about less talking and more singing. That's right. We're talking about how less instruction and less corrections can make for a more productive and far more enjoyable learning experience. I'm going to be talking about executive function skills, a little bit of cognitive load theory, and of course, I'm going to share some simple, practical ideas to help create more student-led experiences in your lessons. Less talking, more singing, right here on the Full Voice Podcast. Hello, my friend. Hello. Welcome to the show. And thank you for pressing play. If you are listening to this podcast at time of release or close to time of release, I want to say happy holidays, perhaps happy new year. I also want to say that I hope you made it to the holidays with grace. I also hope that you have been mindful in your holiday scheduling to give yourself the time and space you need to truly enjoy this season. I mean, if anyone deserves a restful holiday, I know it is my friends and colleagues who have been teaching, performing, singing, playing, conducting, hosting holiday recitals, surviving holiday recitals, going to concerts, hosting concerts, all of the hats that we wear as musicians, as singers, as teachers. And if enjoying the holidays means that you took the time to listen to this podcast, well, thank you. I am grateful. I'm honored that you are here. And today I am talking about, not talking. That's right. I'm talking about less talking in a voice lesson. We care so much about our students. We have so much information. We have lifetimes of experience. And of course, if you're in the private studio, you usually have small packets of time in which to share all of your expertise. So I want to invite you to think back on some of the lessons, maybe the lessons you just finished up last week or a few weeks ago. So thinking back to one of your lessons, how much, maybe what percentage of that lesson was you talking? Now, there's lots of different talkings, right? You could have been giving instructions. You could have been offering modifications, but maybe it was something else. Maybe you went into a story. Maybe you did a deep dive on the history of the composer. Maybe it was a great analogy you were sharing. I'm really guilty of sharing lots of analogies. And then on the other side of that, how much of the lesson time was the student actually doing the singing? Now, I want everyone to know that I am not asking this question to make anybody feel bad. If anyone is guilty of talking too much, it is me. I raise my hand. Hi, I'm the problem. It is me. I have a tendency to talk so much and share so much that I need constant reminders about not talking. And when I was teaching in person, I had a little Post-it note that I wrote shh on. And I stuck it on my piano keyboard stand, and it was always there. And every time I looked at it, it was kind of like a reset. And I would remind myself, okay, I need to let my students sing more. When we went from in-person to online during the COVID, I actually took that Post-it note and I had to put it on my computer screen as a reminder when I was teaching online to not talk as much. I'm going off script here a little bit. When I first recognized many, many moons ago that I was over teaching, I was talking too much and my students weren't getting enough opportunities to actually sing, I quickly grabbed a Post-it note and I had written the words "shut up" on it. It was for me. It wasn't for any of my students to see. And I had put it on my stand. Well, one of my little singers had come behind the piano she wanted to show me something on the piano, and then she saw this Post-it note that said, "Shut up." And she was very concerned because shut up is a bad word. It's not allowed in her house. And she asked me, like, why do you have this here? Why does it say shut up? And I was so embarrassed. And I was like, oh, well, it's just a silly thing that to remind myself not to talk too much. Now, I can't remember exactly what she said, but she totally burned me. It was something like, well, yeah, you obviously need the help, or, oh, you don't really pay attention to this, or something. She basically said that I talk too much. So anyhow, that was, one of my experiences with reminding myself not to talk. So, I want to acknowledge and I want to validate. Okay. So this is challenging, right? Teaching singing is a specialized skill, a very personal experience for each and every one of us. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast. We talk about this in our live office hours and in our workshops and courses. But I always say to teachers, you have to have an extremely large teaching toolbox if you're working with young singers. And of course, the big thing is that we have big hearts. We want our students so badly to be successful, all right? We notice everything and we want to help them. We want to fix the things. We want our students to succeed. And we are desperate to show the value of our lessons. So it is so easy to fall into that teacher trap of oversharing, giving too much information, being too generous with our expertise, right? And over functioning. If you haven't listened to our last episode, episode 211 with Lisa Pinnock, it's about oversharing, overfunctioning, and why teachers are so guilty of overfunctioning. It's a great conversation. If you haven't checked it out, please do. It's so helpful. All of our good intentions, all of our best intentions, we want to share a lot. We want to see our students succeed. We want our lessons to be, I'm doing air quotes here, productive. All of these good intentions often sabotage learning. It is challenging. Now, in this lesson, I want to talk about a few things. So first of all, I want to talk about attention. There is some misunderstanding about what attention is and how much we have of it and when it's available and when it's not. I also want to talk about the nervous system because the nervous system often kicks in and stops learning. I'm going to just dip my toe into the cognitive overload theory, which is so applicable to everything that we do in the studio. You may have studied the cognitive overload theory in your pedagogy courses. If not, we should be studying that in our pedagogy courses. And of course, we're going to talk about why singing has to stay the center of our lessons. So let's think about this for a second. So if I think to a typical lesson with a student, they come in, I welcome them, how was your week? How's school? What's going on? How are you feeling? La, la, la. You have that little conversation. Of course, you want to get into warm-ups. And you start playing a warm-up. Maybe you're vocalizing a little bit, and the student doesn't sing for very long. And all of a sudden, our ears hear all the things we want to fix, all the things we need to make comments about, right? So maybe and it could be simple, really, check in with your posture, relax your jaw, lengthen that vowel, whatever language you use, whatever instructional language is your preference, right? Listen to this, fix that, diction, blah, 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 right? The student hasn't even had a few moments to get settled into our space, and we're already making modifications, asking for corrections, asking for changes. So one of the things that often happens in any industry, this isn't just in singing lessons or music lessons, when we over-explain, when we are on, overdrive of the overcorrecting, right? If we're doing that, students stop actively participating. They don't have to pay attention because we are just going to tell them what to do. And you might be seeing that disconnect with some of your students where they're just kind of zoned out when you're doing all these exercises, right? You can also see students become very hesitant, right? Overcorrecting, over-explaining makes us feel like we're just doing things wrong all of the time. So singing becomes very cautious, right? There's this general holding back. You probably see that from time to time. This is when the lesson becomes teacher-led, and it's not student experienced. And this is a wonderful thing to remember. I love this. Every time we interrupt singing, we interrupt learning. I'm going to say it again. Every time we interrupt singing, we interrupt learning. That might have been a better thing to put on my Post-it note and stick on my piano than shut up, but I wasn't as finely educated back then about that. Anyhow, so something to remember when we get busy with correcting, it causes a disconnect for our students. It causes them to not have to work as hard. Again, going back to the overfunctioning, right? It takes away the agency of our students. It takes it takes away the trust relationship. We don't trust them to make their own corrections because we are going to tell them when to make the corrections. So, and friends, you might have experienced this type of lesson. I certainly had voice teachers. I've had amazing voice teachers, and no disrespect to any of them, but some of them were very, very eager to correct things. And it can really take the energy away from the lesson. Now, I want to dive into attention. Attention, engagement. We talk about these a lot in some of our courses and some of our workshops that we would do with teachers. There's a very helpful shift in understanding attention that is very helpful. So here's a couple of things just to keep in mind. Attention is not something students either have or don't have. Like, it's not a personality trait. And it's not about being good or misbehaving. It's a skill. And it is a skill, like any skill, that can be taught. It can be strengthened, supported. And I want to share with you just personally, because you and I are friends now. When teachers say things like, oh, children have short attention spans, or, children can only stay on task for a few minutes at a time, my left eye gets a little twitchy because I think that shows the misunderstanding about what attention is and how it actually works. So, attention is part of a bigger set of skills known as executive function. Now, executive function is a catchy term nowadays. We're hearing more and more about executive function, which is a good thing. It's a great thing, actually. Now, it's common to hear about executive function when we're speaking of neurodiversity and students who are neurodiverse. I want to shout out, and I've mentioned before, Tara Sumpner. She is a speech language pathologist and an executive function specialist. Her organization is called Seeds of Learning. And I had the absolute pleasure of doing a learning cohort with her. And all I can say, friends, is I wish I had this information a decade ago, 2 decades ago. It would have profoundly changed the way I approach singing. And when I was going through her material and her courses and the conversations with other learning professionals, and her cohort isn't just speech language pathologists. She had classroom teachers, administrative people, occupational therapists, and private teachers like me learning about learning. the information is so incredibly helpful. Um, if you are in Instagram, I recommend that you follow her. Just look up Tara Sumpner or Seeds of Learning. You'll find her. She shares incredible information. And if you are looking for professional development that like completely levels up your understanding of how brains work and how learning actually happens, I highly recommend her learning cohorts. And I will put all of her information in the show notes. And I want to shout out to my friends and colleagues who are listening to this podcast that took me up on that invitation, because many of you have reached out and said, I totally appreciate the information. Thank you so much. So good for you for checking it out. So let's get back to executive function. So executive function includes skills like attention, initiation, so starting a task, being able to start a task, staying on task is an executive function skill, holding information in the mind. That's working memory. That is a skill. And I struggle a lot with my working memory these days. Also, some more advanced executive function skills would be things like planning, like having a goal and creating a plan to achieve that goal. And even more advanced is shifting strategies when something's not working in our plan. Now, these are all skills that we start developing from the time we are born into our 30s. So, my friends, your tweens and teens are also developing these executive function skills. So important to know that they have not mastered their planning, organizing, attention, all of those things. So, and here is a really wonderful thing for teachers, singing teachers to know. Singing lessons are a CrossFit intense workout for executive function skills. Huge executive function skill development happens in every singing lesson. Incredible opportunity. So if you need another reason to convince people why they should take singing lessons, it's wonderful for childhood development skills. All right. So it's important. So like going back to attention, attention lives in the body, right? Somebody's attention is not going to grow or get more intense through an explanation. It grows in experiences. If I were to take my son to the ball field and the coaches were to sit them all down and discuss batting skills, my poor child would be very agitated. He would not be able to sit still. He would be pacing and pacing and pacing. He would be very, very angry after only a short period of time. And he would not be listening to the coach at all. You hand him a bat, you put him in the batting cage, and he will stay there for hours, focused very intensely on his goals and objectives in the batting cage. The same thing happens in our voice lessons. So when we talk too much, when we are giving detailed explanations, that lecture about the respiratory system, you know what I'm talking about. We are asking students of any age to rely heavily on working memory. They've got to take in this information and they have to remember it. It has to stay in the short-term memory compartment. We're also asking them to focus on verbal processing. They have to understand what we're saying. Following directions is a very advanced skill. So the more complex, the more detailed, the more verbal processing we're asking a student to do. And don't think it's just kids that you confuse, because I have done this to adults. So there, I confess. The other thing that we're asking them to rely heavily on is cognitive control. So this is things like holding that goal in their mind or choosing what to focus on, right? Or how are they going to adjust their behavior in that moment with all of the instructions that you just gave them? Now, for many students, especially children, students who are neurodivergent, or anyone that comes to your studio who is tired. Do you ever have students come to your studio and they're tired? Does that ever happen? That happens a lot, doesn't it? Right? For those students, all of the instructions, it's too much. You're asking too much on many different levels. I also want to share maybe this is a helpful reframe, where attention goes, right? So if I'm talking to a student, I'm asking them to direct their attention outward towards me. They have to listen. They have to hold the language. They have to comprehend the language. They have to think about all of the instructions. They have to translate those words into actions. The attention is outward, right? That's a heavy executive heavy executive function load. So is speaking that. Singing, on the other hand, pulls the attention inward. The body has to organize itself. We have to feel the sensations, or the sound is giving us feedback, immediate feedback, right? That is a task that becomes concrete and doable, right? Singing actually supports executive function rather than depleting it or overloading it. And repetition, right? So one of the strategies that I share, actually, if you follow us on Instagram, at The Full Voice, this is one of the little teacher challenges that I shared on our Instagram page. So it's a really simple teacher challenge. Allow your students a minimum of 3 repetitions before interrupting with instruction, whether it's modification or anything. This allows students to focus on the task. And here's the beautiful thing. When given the opportunity to repeat the activity, students often self-correct without having to be corrected. So important. This is where we need to bring in information about the nervous system. The nervous system and well-meaning criticisms. So here is a teacher truth bomb. Corrections aren't neutral. Even kind feedback can feel like a threat, especially for your students who are perfectionists. You know who I'm talking about. Especially for any student that is trying to please you, is trying to impress you, right? This triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response. And my friends, the fight, flight, or freeze response is sneaky. It looks different for every single human, and it doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always big tears or someone that's really upset or someone who's in a panic. In fact, most times in a voice lesson, it's going to be quiet. That's what makes it really hard to read. And I have misread my students time and time and time again. So here are some examples. Instead of distress or stress or agitation, we might see a student who suddenly gets quiet. They just kind of stop participating. They're not saying anything anymore. You might see a student who is just kind of staring into space, staring at the floor, sometimes staring at the piano. If you've set your student up in a way in your studio where they are watching the piano when you are playing exercises, that actually might just be a zoning out mechanism for them. Sometimes their breathing will get really sporadic or shallow. Phrases start to get shorter and shorter, right? You might see kids, especially, that get really silly. Actually, I take that back. I've had adults that have done this to me. They get really nervous and they start like laughing or being silly or interrupting with talking and being silly. You might hear the "I don't know" response. I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes it looks like a student who was engaged and then suddenly isn't, right? Sometimes you might not notice anything at all. It might be so, so subtle. But here's the thing, learning has stopped. They are not taking in anything. The brain is protecting them and they are in survival mode, right? Now, again, my friends, you are doing a great job. You are an awesome, awesome teacher. This is challenging, right? As teachers, we're trained to listen to sound, watch for technique. We're not trained to watch for nervous system cues, right? Sometimes we're so busy playing the piano and watching the score. We're not watching our students at all. And again, no shame. We're all doing this. We have to focus on what we have to focus on this. So one of the things that happens is when we see the student shutting down, again, not understanding that it could be a fight or flight response, we often things like, oh, they're so distracted. Oh, they're not paying attention. Oh, why aren't they looking at their music, right? Oh, they're just not trying today, right? Maybe they don't understand. Maybe I should explain it to them again. Right? That is our go-to instinct. We immediately want to add more instruction, make it even clearer for them, right? And that's the absolute opposite of what is helping. See the teacher trap there? It's so mean and sneaky, and it happens to all of us, and it happens to the best of us. The best of us. So please don't feel bad, right? One teaching strategy I would like to share with you, and something that has been so good for me, hard to watch sometimes. I have been recording myself with my students for, probably 10, 15 years. We use a lot of these videos, training videos for our teacher training, but we also use it when we're testing our resources. We actually watch how students react and collaborate with teachers while they're using our resources. And here's the truth about full voice music materials. If kids don't like them, they don't get published. So just so you know. But I have been recording my students for a long time, and I've had the opportunity to actually study these videos. I've watched them again and again and again. And it's in rewatching these that I have noticed things that were completely oblivious to me in the moment with the student. I have noticed subtle reactions that I didn't notice when we were doing the exercise or learning the song. So if you can, and again, you don't share this with the student. It's actually for you. It's for your teaching skills and your interactions with your students. Watch your student, like listen to your instructions. Listen to how you explain the topic or the modifications you're looking for, and then watch your student closely. Watch their bodies. The subtle cues will become so obvious to you. It's a very helpful exercise, and please be kind to yourself. I remember the first time I was watching some of the videos with me when I started doing small group classes, and I was like, what am I doing? I'm a fraud. These kids are running all over the place and not paying attention to me. So anyhow, it's a great exercise. But my friends, please be kind to yourself. Here at Full Voice Music, we believe that teaching young singers is a highly specialized skill. And that's why we've been partnering with expert teachers who are in the trenches to offer professional development that is affordable, convenient, and relevant. Our workshops focus on the real challenges teachers face every day: lesson pacing, attention, vocal health for children, and the ongoing work of practice and progress. We prioritize training that offers practical strategies you can use right away, helping you teach with greater confidence and compassion. I am so excited to share our upcoming workshop, Cultivating Consent in the Voice Studio with Megan Durham. Now, Megan joined us on the podcast back in episode 158, where we explored trauma-informed voice care. It remains, episode 158 remains our most listened to episode of all time, highlighting just how relevant this topic is for teachers today. That conversation helped us understand how trauma can show up in our bodies and in our studios, and why teaching often involves far more than just technique alone. So on Sunday, January 25th, 2026, I will be welcoming Megan into my Zoom room, and she will be expanding on these ideas in a live workshop designed for you. She will explore how students develop through environments of trust, curiosity, safety, and care, and share trauma-informed principles that center consent, power awareness, and student agency in vocal pedagogy. Now, my friend, just to be clear, this is not about turning voice teachers into therapists. It's about making thoughtful, grounded teaching choices that help students feel safe, supported, and empowered to sing. A 14-day replay will be available from January 26th through February 9th. If you cannot attend it live, you can take in the replay. Now, if Megan's podcast episode resonated with you, or if you have been thinking that you want to create safer spaces in your studio, this workshop is for you. You can find the details and register on our website, and I truly hope that you will join us for this important learning opportunity. I want to take a little bit of your time, and I want to talk about cognitive overload theory. I'm not going to go deep diving. It's simply an overview, but this so applies to everything that we do in the voice studio. And I find I love learning about learning. I love educational theory, universal design. I love all of these things. I am fascinated with all of it. So please indulge me. I think you'll find this helpful. And I am just being very general here. So there is a learning theory called cognitive load theory that helps us to explain why less talking often leads to better teaching and better learning. So at the very core of it, the theory is about working memory and about how working memory is limited. We can only hold a small amount of new information at one time. When we exceed that limit, and it doesn't take much to exceed that limit, the brain can't process it. It doesn't store it. It doesn't need more processing time. And this includes when we are working with students who are highly motivated and trying. So it's not about attention or necessarily engagement. If a student is trying, they still only have so much working memory. Now, I want to share a little story about this. Working memory, I have noticed my working memory is certainly not functioning as well as I would like it to. So the other day I was at Value Village with my mom because we are doing Thriftmas. I love thrifting. And on the announcements, there was the little announcement that if you texted this 5-digit number, you would get like discount offers from Value Village. From the time it took me to to get my purse and reach into my purse, I had forgotten the number. Even though I had said it out loud like 3 times, it was something like 55935 or something. I don't know. Don't try to text that number, but I couldn't remember it. I was like, what is wrong with me? I just heard the number. That is a perfect example of working memory, not being able to hold information for a very long time. So, there we go. I'm sharing all my deep, dark secrets with you here on the Full Voice Podcast. So, a very brief overview. There are 3 kinds of cognitive load, right? Number 1 is intrinsic load. This is the natural complexity of the task. Singing is already a high intrinsic load. There's so much going on, especially if we're reading music or learning new music. We're singing, we're reading, we're listening, we're counting, we're like, there's just so much going on. So that's the intrinsic load. The extraneous load is the unnecessary information we add. This is when we use too many explanations, when we correct too much, when we use abstract language or really bizarre analogies that don't help the student connect to the intrinsic information. And what happens, so we're explaining too much while a student is singing, we are increasing the extraneous load, right? We're asking them to hold more instructions. We're asking them to monitor for mistakes, right? Trying to remember what comes next, trying to modify and change. We are adding to the already complex load. And it's not difficult to do. It doesn't take a lot for us to add too much to it. Another example of this, which I have certainly witnessed in doing like teacher training or in courses, when somebody has created slides, right? They're explaining something very complex, but then they created like a slide deck and the slides aren't putting the pieces together. Maybe they're too cluttered. Maybe the font is too small. And now you've got to try and decipher what they've put on the slide as well as what they're talking about. That is a perfect example of extraneous load. And it happens a lot. It happens a lot in different industries, maybe at work, maybe at school. Now, what we want to do, the third type of load is germane. This is useful information that helps learning stick. Useful activities. Repetition. Letting students do things over and over and over again. Noticing. Bringing awareness to what they are doing, to what is happening, to what is changing. And meaningful experiences, having successful experiences that make them feel good about the learning process. This is germane loading. And that's what we want to focus on. That's the opportunity we have to help the learning, to help the lesson be productive, to help the learning sticky learning. Right? Now, it doesn't mean that we're not giving instructions. So if you're feeling like, well, I guess I'm just supposed to not tell them anything, that's not what I'm saying. But it does tell us to be more intentional. It does tell us to be very mindful about how much information we are giving them. Can we give them fewer words? Simple instructions. Sometimes in a lesson, you can simply gesture. I know when I want my students to make vowels, do a bit of vowel modification, I might just gesture to my jaw. I might open my mouth a bit for them. And that's the only cue they get. And they know exactly what I'm looking for. That's a wonderful way to simplify instruction. Having a clear focus and having single focus. So one lesson, one focus. Maybe you're working on a lesson and you're working on diction. That's the focus of the lesson. And of course, more repetition. Try that teacher challenge, that invitation to let your students repeat themselves before even saying a word, right? So this is how we transition from a lot of thinking into an embodied skill. Now, I do want to take a second about, because you're probably thinking, well, what about, saying that they've done a good job? What about giving them positive feedback? What if it's not just negative feedback? What if it's positive feedback? Positive feedback is very important, obviously, but we need to be very specific when we are giving praise. So, generic praise like good job. Oh, that was lovely. I really enjoyed that. That doesn't build awareness. And here's the sneaky thing. Your students singing, they might be thinking about diction and how the piano part just has confused them a little bit, right? And then you say something like, "Oh, good job," because you were listening to vowel modification or how they where they were breathing in the phrase, right? Or whatever. So what you are praising them for, they might not be even aware of what they have done correctly. And so it can be very confusing, and so not helpful when we just have generic praise. So moment marking language. Moment marking language. This is what we do. This allows us to highlight what they did correctly and bring their awareness to what we are noticing. So, noticing, awareness. Now, these need to happen immediately, very close to after they have sung something, right? And it needs to be, again, simple. Name one specific moment. Don't go through the whole performance, one specific moment. Here's some examples. Did you feel how your breath kept moving on that last note? Right? We're bringing attention to exactly what we were listening for, and we are asking them how it felt. That vowel stayed really tall on the word shine, right? Or did you notice how that phrase felt much easier the second time, right? The other phrase that I love that works in here, and I love it so much. And again, I want to shout out to Tara Sumner because this was part of her training. But this is so important. So you give them some feedback. I love the way your breath. Like, how did you do that? Asking them. That vowel was gorgeous. That word was gorgeous. How did you do that? Even if you know how they did it, of course you know how they did it, but you're asking them, how did you do that? They have to reflect inward. They have to start thinking. They become actively participating. And you and the student are now on the same page. Moment marking language draws attention to a specific success. It builds awareness. It avoids judgment. It builds confidence. With moment marking language, your students are able to take more information home with them for when they practice. So here's a simple approach. Let your students sing multiple times. Let them have multiple opportunities to sing the exercise, sing the phrase, even sing the song. I have had in my studio, one of the things I love to do is we're just going to sing songs today. And the first 2 times they sing, I don't say anything. Maybe a moment marking language. I love the way you use dynamics in the chorus there. That was incredible. How did you do that? Right? So the beautiful thing about this is we're moving away from fixing to noticing. Moving away, no fixing, but noticing. Right? So this type of awareness helps our students build agency, build independence. The more independence our students have, the more confidence they have. I get so excited thinking about this. So I want to wrap up. I want to just wrap things up. So I want to just clarify a few things. Talking less in your lessons doesn't mean that you care less. It doesn't mean that you know less. It doesn't mean that you don't have answers. And it definitely does not mean that you are doing less as a teacher. But this is hard. It means that you're being brave. It means that you are trusting the learning process and you are trusting the student in front of you. You're trusting that singing itself is a wonderful teacher. Now, if this change in approach, if this makes you feel uncomfortable, I completely understand that. And it makes complete sense. This is why it's so difficult. This is why you get the Post-it notes with the reminders and you slap it on your monitor or you slap it on your piano. It feels different because, well, most of us were trained this way. Most of us had constant correction, constant explanations, right? We were probably taught to guide and correct our students this way. Stepping back can feel like you're stepping away and you're not contributing. But here's some things to remember, okay? When students sing more, they become active participants. They notice more. They learn more. Their confidence in trusting themselves grows. So, next week, when you go back after the holidays, after you have been well rested and rejuvenated and restored, I want you to try a few things. Start small. Say, let them sing. Let them sing again. And before you jump in, ask them what they think. You will be surprised how much learning happens in that silence. Teaching fewer words isn't about teaching less. It's about space for everybody to notice, to be curious. That's the important one too. And you're giving them space to develop their confidence. It's so very, very important. My friend and colleague, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me. I hope the new year welcomes you with exciting new opportunities. I hope you are passionately manifesting your wishes because the universe is listening. And before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for being part of our community. I hope you'll continue to visit our website and to support Full Voice Music. If you're new to our company, we are a tiny education company from Canada, and we have the privilege and the honor of working alongside incredible teachers and educators, and we have fantastic composers. Together, we create resources that are truly kid and teacher tested. Everything that we make is to support joyful, thoughtful singing and to help teachers feel confident in working with young singers. So thank you for joining me today. Happy holidays, Happy New Year, and as always, happy singing.